Morning. I got the lavalier mic right here because some of y'all have not been able to hear me. So I'll try to speak up a little bit. But be forewarned, you're going to hear some slurping noises. As the elixir of life slowly pumps into his veins. Oh, wow. So, is the camera moving? There, get that glare out of the picture. So, so this morning, mostly what I'm going to talk about is last night's Zoom meeting with Pete Vetri over at Atlantis Models. And great guy, ton of knowledge, and most of it hard earned. I had done the Atlantis video some time back, and they were one of the few websites, that had their own history so well documented on their website, which is a wonderful thing. It made it for really, really easy to do the video. And of course, I had Andy Anches to. I think I was in contact with Andy at that point. No, that maybe I'd already done it before I met up with him. But anyway, first we wound up chatting for over 90 minutes, and we'll probably do another one next week. I got so much to digest. It might be a little bit of time before I get it up, because, but I'm gonna chat with Pete or email Pete and see if I can either go with what I got and do a part one, and the next week do a part two, or I can wait until we have another meeting, and because he represents his company, so we've got to make sure that it we don't give away any corporate secrets or anything. But I did learn a lot from him. Gosh, every time I talk to these guys, each one of them just has a voluminous amount of knowledge. But he gave me some photographs to use that aren't on any of the websites, just personal stuff, and some real eye openers. How they came into some of the molds, and which I won't spoil that. I'll let him tell the story. But a couple of rumors that I'd heard are true. I don't know how much I want to get into it, because he told me this stuff on a Zoom interview, so I'm sure it's okay. It's not like a secret. But did you guys know that if you want to make something like a B-25, if you're a model maker and you want to make an old airplane like a B-25 Mitchell or P-51 Mustang, do you know you still have to pay royalties? Not joking. You know, following World War II, a lot of these companies merged in both England and the United States. In England, it was more of a forced thing with what the Brits call rationalization, and a lot of companies unwillingly were forced to merge into what eventually became BAC, British Aircraft Corporation. But that's when you saw a lot of names like Hunting Aircraft um, and a lot of others. The names disappear, and I think I don't think it all happened right away. But as much as I know about airplanes, I'm having trouble. I'm having trouble remembering the names of all those British companies, because like Miles and all these others, and I forget who merged with who, but there were a lot of shotgun marriages, and they did the same with the airlines, and airlines like Eagle disappeared. This wasn't all right. It was after World War II, but it wasn't like right after the war. But there were just so many mergers, and in the United States, the same thing happened, but they happened more voluntarily. And Consolidated, that made the B-24, merged with Vultee, that made quite a few aircraft, including the famous BT-13 Vultee trainer, the Maytag Messerschmitt. Well, they became Consolidated Vultee, which eventually changed its name to Convair. And what was it? North American eventually merged with Rockwell, and then I think through some other mergers, they eventually became, what was it? I'm forgetting off the top of my head. Was it General Dynamics? Which when all of them merged, then Convair merged with them, and then I think that's when they all became General Dynamics, all grouped together. So if I remember right, people who made the P-51s and the B-25s, and the B-24s, and a bunch of other airplanes, all wound up, I think it was under General Dynamics. So, and I'm not sure what the status of General Dynamics is now, but because Boeing has the rights to a bunch of them, and Lockheed Martin has the rights to a bunch of them. But the point is all these old airplanes, because they bought the parent companies through all these mergers, they still have the rights to, apparently, to the aircraft. So in most cases, it's pretty much a formality, and you would think they would, be happy to. I mean, just free money. Here, give us a tiny royalty and go make as many as you want. Well, apparently, some of these companies do not want their models being made. They're older. They don't mind the new ones. They don't want. So it's hard to believe that something that was made 70 years ago, you still got to get a royalty for today, but you do. And a couple of the kits, they're not renewing the royalties on them, or the licensing, like not royalties, it's the licensing. And I'll let him tell you the whole story, but I will tell you this. Atlantis currently makes the Jolly Green Giant and the the Cheyenne, the experimental gunship, the Cheyenne, the greatest helicopter the Army never bought. And but that wasn't the Army not getting it. I think the Air Force having a hissy fit over its performance had a lot to do with that. But long story short, if you want the Cheyenne or the Jolly Green, you better get them now. Just take some advice from Max. In fact, I would say you should get 2 or 3 and just put them on the shelf. Build one if you want. Just hang on to them, because stuff, And some of the companies, he says, are real easy to work with. They're just like, here, pick what you want. Here's pays the royalty, on your merry way. And others are like, oh, we need this and we need that. And it's just, that's when I finally get off my butt and start doing some of the Aurora stories that are in that column, The Runner, that Andy Anchus gave me a bunch of copies of. He talks about, in one of them, how the Concorde, Aurora was going to make a Concorde until they sat down with the people, and they were like, well, you've got to pay us royalties and all this other stuff. And they're like, that's not going to happen, and some of the licensed properties are actually easier to deal with because they're more straight up, and others aren't. And he talks about they're getting the license for the Zorro. And the nice thing about a lot of the UFOs, Atlanta started off making UFO models, and he'll tell you the whole lineage. In fact, their first 3 kits were all unidentified flying objects, 3 or 4 kits. And they have a pretty good line of them. I think 7 or 8 of them. They got the George Adamski and the TRE, the Triang, the Eve. Eve was I think it was their first. Anyway, the point is that those were a lot easier to deal with, first few, because there were no royalties on them. Some of them, they just bought the rights outright, or had them repopped by Lindbergh or whatever. And he talks about how they went from selling models at Mega Hobby, how they started Mega Hobby, why, and it's just a really good interview. And a lot of things that happened with the molds, and I may have at some point said that Atlantis primarily did repops of kits, which is true, but they have cut their own molds before. So they've got a couple of guys that can do that for them. And how mold making has gotten so much better, with CAD technology and everything. And just a really, really informative. And the aggravations, how much they have to deal with lawyers. You don't think about it, but a kit model's a choking hazard. So you got to have all kinds of insurance and stuff. how much it would cost for someone to have the mold made and get it in production. The boxes apparently can be as or more expensive than what's inside them. So it's hard to believe, but there you go. And it makes me wonder why some people haven't gone back to bagged kits just to save some money. But then, of course, you don't really save that much, I wouldn't think. But, as we all know, box art sells, and you can't put impressive box art on a cardboard header. Plus, the things aren't terribly well protected. But, we've all been spoiled by having beautiful boxes. But then there's the bag on the inside so the parts don't get lost. And making decals. I mean, Pete and Rick DeFabro, his partner, those guys, they work hard. And I forgot to ask him how many, I don't want to get into proprietary stuff. I was like, when I was going to ask how many employees they had, like, just do you have a rough idea how big the company is? But we never got to that. But that's okay. That's not really important. I know a lot of you guys like a peek behind the curtain, and this is pretty much throwing the curtain wide open. He real upfront guy, didn't hold back, and probably one reason we need to do an edit on it, make sure there's everything in there's cool, because we were just it just turned into a conversation between the two of us. When he sent me I couldn't record on my end because I don't know if it's on Zoom if you can only record on the end because I tried to record on my end and it said ask the person for permission. I went okay, but that was it. The box went away and it still wouldn't turn on. And I was like, okay, I'm missing something here on using Zoom. But he was able to record it. But when he sent me all the stuff, I got the audio, not the visual, which is no big deal. I mean, it's just me and him chatting in two boxes. And so I overlaid photos instead. It's more of a podcast. But you know what? I think that actually is a little bit better because, just it's a little more interesting. I mean, it's not like you guys don't see enough of my smiling face. But just had a heck of a time, and right now we're hoping to do it again next week. I'm looking forward. Now tonight I'm supposed to do the same thing with Mike Machat, and the plan is to talk mostly about Douglas aircraft kit models because he'd spent a long time in Douglas. So it's to talk about Douglas aircraft kit models. Because, one thing I'd noticed about Douglas aircraft was that they, at least during World War II, they made transports and a lot of single engine bomber and attack aircraft, Dauntless, Sky Raider, which of course didn't get into World War II, was used heavily in Korea, hell in Vietnam for that matter. Of course they made the DC-3s and 4s and later the 6s and 7s before they went into jets. And I could be wrong, but it doesn't look like Douglas really got into fighters until later on after the war. And then I'm not sure that had something to do with the merger with McDonnell, because when it became McDonnell Douglas, because McDonnell had made like the Phantom 1 and later on the McDonnell Douglas made the Phantom 2. So that may be it. So we'll be talking about that tonight. Going back to the discussion with Pete, he had his Godzilla doll with the Aurora stamp there. He was showing it to me, and he was telling me a bunch about the molds. And he sent me a great picture of the Godzilla mold. There's a story that Andy had mentioned that he mentions that goes into it, but apparently you got to understand that man, there's just so much to talk about. I'm just starting to ramble and all these disjointed thoughts because that's how my mind tries to work. But apparently the American mold companies made much bigger molds, whereas in China they'll make they use smaller molds, which is why if you get a Chinese repop of a kit, you might notice you get a bunch of smaller rectangular runner trees, or what we call sprue trees, but runner trees that, whereas the American kits, you have the real big ones because they, I don't know if it's called a plantain or frame, but the unit they use is smaller. So they'll make a production run. They'll have more stampings and just probably maybe just to keep smaller machinery, and of course maybe it fits in a somewhat smaller box. I don't know, but it just he just gets into all this kinds of nuts and bolts stuff that is so cool. He talks about the derailment, the famous Aurora train derailment and everything, and oh, one kit that I don't have in my collection is the old Aurora, formerly Comet Air Commander, because people always want $100, $200 for the bloody thing. And it's like a 12-piece kit. And it doesn't even wheels. It's like, anyway. I had said, if you guys were to repop that, but he was talking about the condition mold. He said, but when they opened the Air Commander mold, there was still mud inside from the derailment. And, which of course, my little brain went, oh, so you have the Aero Commander mold is what you're telling me. But apparently it had some issues being exposed to moisture, and he talks about the way you can do temp repairs, but they don't hold up. He gets into some of that technical stuff everybody's asked about, myself included. So I'm real anxious to get that up. And guys, I think I'm going to upload this one raw right from the phone because I got physical therapy in a little bit, so I really don't have time to do much of an edit. So we'll just run with this, and we'll talk to you guys later, and you have a great day.